What you'll see in Visual Studio 2012 is just integrated support for web deploy. If you happen to be running Visual Studio 2010, you can also install the web deploy support and get some of the same capability as part of Visual Studio 2010. If I just hit import here, I can actually browse out to my publishing profile that I just downloaded. And once Visual Studio pulls that in, it already has all the credentials, the endpoint for doing the deployment. In fact, it'll also map in the connection information that's needed for my SQL database. So I don't have to go copy and paste all that SQL connection information out separately. That's pulled in as part of that publishing profile. If I just quickly go through the publish process, what you'll see here is that Visual Studio will now do the compile, do the build, it'll grab all the content, and it's actually communicating out with Windows Azure through web deploy, and it's publishing out all that content. In this case, because it's an ASP.MVC 4.5 project, and I'm using some of the latest features, such as ASP.NET SignalR, there's also some additional assemblies that are being deployed as well. Because those assemblies are in my local bin directory, they're just handled just like any other assets or any other content and deployed out to Windows Azure websites. In fact, if I was using any other third-party controls or components that were in my local bin, those would be handled and managed as well. So you can see here in just a few seconds that we've deployed out our content. Our website is now starting up for the first time. And once that's complete, what we'll actually be able to do is log in and navigate through our website. And so just literally in a few minutes, we're able to go take a local website we have with the database and deploy that out to Windows Azure websites. What I can do from here is actually go back over to the Azure Management Portal. And so as my website starts getting usage, I would see some of that usage right here on the dashboard in the monitoring view. I can also go and configure my website as well. And so I can turn on the various framework versions, PHP support as well if I need to, turn on enable diagnostics, and even configure some of the app settings I may have. I can change my connection strings from here, flip my default documents, and even map in additional HTTP handlers. As I need to go and scale my website, I can go over to the Scale tab. And what you'll notice here is right now I'm running this website in the free mode. So if you sign up for Windows Azure today, you get those ongoing 10 free websites. And so here I'm actually running in that free mode today. What I can also do, though, is go over to a shared mode. And in a shared mode, what we do is we actually deploy your website across a shared set of servers we have, where those servers are shared with other websites that maybe you've developed or that other Windows Azure customers have developed and deployed. And so I can actually run this in shared mode. And you'll notice with that, I have the ability to also scale that out. So I can scale out my website across multiple shared servers, up to 6 shared servers. And so this just provides a really nice model for running shared servers. In fact, I could run my website across 3 shared servers, load balanced across those 3 shared servers for less than $1 a month. And so it provides a really nice model for getting started and running sites. If I really need the scale, though, I can also go over to reserve mode. And with reserve mode, similar to what you saw with virtual machines, I can specify the size of the underlying VM I want and get that full virtual machines instances resources. So I have the full memory, the full CPU, everything available as part of that virtual machine. All those resources are available to me. In fact, I could even go to 4 cores or a large VM and scale that all the way up to 10 instances, taking advantage of 40 cores for my website by moving this slider. Let me go ahead and flip this back down to small here, and I'll provision a couple instances and turn this on in reserve mode. So, and we'll see in just a few seconds here, what we'll actually do is deploy that website now onto dedicated reserved instances just by flipping a few configuration options here within the Windows Azure Management Portal. Once I'm in reserve mode, there's a few different options that will become available to me. If I go back over to the Configure tab, one of the things that you'll see here is that we've turned on support for domains. So you can now go to your DNS provider and map in either through CNAMEs or through A-name records. You can map in your own domain to a Windows Azure website. So if you want a root domain, vslive.net, I'm sure that one's, of course, already taken, then you could actually map that straight into Windows Azure websites. Another thing that we introduced just a week ago is support for endpoint monitoring. And with endpoint monitoring, what I can actually do is define a new endpoint profile. So for example, in this case, I can specify that I want to monitor my website from Dublin as well as Amsterdam. And also, let me define one for Asia as well. And what this will do is provide some outside-in monitoring for my website. So after I've configured this, in about every 5 minutes, we will actually start sending requests into your website, the URL that you specified, and monitoring its availability. We're doing that, again, from our Windows Azure infrastructure we're running around the world. So new capability that we just turned on last week that's exposed through websites, but you'll also see it's turned on for a number of the other Azure services. So you've seen how I can just quickly get started with Windows Azure websites and provision and deploy applications. What I want to do is talk about some additional compute models that we're exposing. One of the additional models that we provide support for is cloud services. So my clicker's not working here. One of the additional models we provide support for is a model called cloud services. And this may be the model that some of you in this room are familiar with today for running Windows Azure. With cloud services, we provide the ability for you to not only run 10 instances, but scale up to hundreds or even thousands of machine instances. And so we kind of think of it as the infinite scale kind of model. What we do with the cloud services as well is give you more access to some of that infrastructure while still providing automation. So for example, if I want to install some custom components as part of the startup of their virtual machine, I want to access the registry, I want to turn on performance counters. Those are things I can do within cloud services-based environment. Cloud services are really ideal for building those in-tier or multi-tier apps. Those cases where not only do you have a web front end, but you also may have some background processes. You may have a dedicated caching tier. You may have a dedicated business logic or integration tier. Those are scenarios where you'd want to tap into more of a cloud services-based model. Let me go ahead and show you how cloud services work within Windows Azure. Flip back over to my demo machine. And what I'm going to do from here is actually flip back over into Visual Studio, where I have that cloud survey project. What I'll do here is just right-click, and I'll say Add Windows Azure Cloud Service Project. And so what I can do is I can take a website, and I can quickly convert that into a cloud service. When I do that, Visual Studio will add in a new project for me that will contain some additional metadata for deploying my multi-tier cloud service. You'll notice here that it gives this concept of a role, where a role is effectively the workload or the code you want to run. So I have a role here for my web front end, and I can even configure that within Visual Studio, like the number of instances I want to run, the size of the VMs, and even turn on caching support that runs as part of that web-based role. I can also do is add in some additional roles. So in this case, I can add in a role called like a background worker, hit add, and add that in. And so I can define these multi-tier based applications through the concept of roles. A background worker or background role basically allows me to have what's effectively like a Windows service. I have a run method, it's an entry point into my role, and I can go run things based on a timer, based on a loop, maybe wake up and listen to a queue. I can run things in the background that I may need to use as part of my application that I'm building. Once I've built out this cloud service, I can then deploy it straight out to Windows Azure, similar to how I did with the website. I can select Publish, go over to the publishing dialog here, and from here I can pick which cloud service I want to deploy that into, but I can also turn on some additional options. One of the things you see here is the ability to target multiple environments. And with cloud services, you can target not only a production-based environment, but we also give you the ability to run a side-by-side staging environment and swap those over time. And so really giving you a little more capabilities as part of the way you manage your application lifecycle. So I could go through this wizard and get the deployment started. For the sake of time here, what I've done is already provisioned a cloud service that's running out in Windows Azure right now for my cloud survey app. And so from here, you can see I can drill into the dashboard, see some of the usage information for my cloud service. I have the ability to monitor the web endpoints and see how the requests are doing coming in from other data centers into my web-based application. I can see the number of cores that are being used for my application. I could browse over to the instances, and you'll notice in this case I'm actually running 2 instances for my background process and 2 instances for my web-based front end. What you see with Windows Azure Cloud Services as well is I also get the support to remote desktop straight into those Azure instances. So if I want to actually inspect what's going on with those instances, that's an option that's available to me as well. As I need to go and scale this service out, I can do so on the Scale tab. And so similar to what you saw with websites, I can flip the slider and scale up the number of cores. In this case, though, because this is a multi-tier application, I can scale those tiers independently. So for example, if I want to go and handle more web front-end traffic, I can add more instances to handle that traffic. Those instances will be provisioned, my code will be deployed, and they'll be brought up on the load balancer, serving up some of that traffic. I can also, though, scale out the background process, the other role, independently. And so it allows you a lot of flexibility depending on how you architect and how you deploy and manage those applications. So you've seen in just a few minutes how you can get started building multi-tier apps as well, in addition to websites. Let's talk about now what we're doing with additional type of app that's pretty important these days, which is mobile applications. With mobile applications, we saw an opportunity to not only provide you the ability for you to go run your own code, build your own web APIs, but give you a set of higher level services that you could turn on within Windows Azure. From talking to a lot of developers that are building Windows Store apps, Android, iOS apps today, we found a lot of common needs for those applications. The need to go and easily store, manage, and query data. The ability to go send down notifications, push notifications down to the device, and do that in a very simple way. The ability to go support multiple forms of authentication providers and identity providers, including things like Twitter and Facebook, Google and Microsoft accounts. So we saw that ability to go and deliver some higher level sets of services. And so we introduced mobile services probably about 8 months ago, and since then we've been turning on just a number of new capabilities. Today, with last week's update for mobile services, we now have a set of SDKs for building mobile apps across Windows Store, Windows Phone, iOS, Android, and now also HTML5. So I can build HTML-based web experiences to access those same back-end services. We also have the ability to go run scheduled scripts in the background. So scenarios where I want to go pull in data and suck in data into my Azure environment and process that and maybe send out notifications. That's an option I can go take advantage of as well. And so just a lot of new capabilities we're delivering as part of mobile services. What I want to do is show you how some of the stuff comes together with a quick demo. Back over to my demo machine here. And to show you this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a Windows Store app that I've started designing. An application we call Event Buddy. It's a simple application that we've designed. It's not been connected yet to any back end. Let me go ahead and start this application up so you can see it. And what this application does is it just allows me to go define and manage events. So define events like, for example, VS Live. And then I could define the sessions that are related to the event and so forth. One of the things you'll notice is that we've designed this app, but right now it's just not persisting any of the data. So what I want to do is connect this up to Windows Azure mobile services to persist some of that data. So let me flip back here and I'll stop this app. And I'll go out to the Windows Azure management portal and to the mobile services section. Just like with all the other services, I could go down to the new menu, create, and provision my mobile service as well as the SQL backend for that service. From here, though, I've provisioned one to get started for our Event Buddy app. And you'll notice on the Get Quick Start menu here, I have the ability to choose my platform. All the platforms I mentioned earlier, Windows Store all the way to HTML.